Hey everyone, we have Zan from Blockstack. He'll be doing a talk around proof of transfer mining, how token holders can stack STX to earn Bitcoin. Once he starts talking, can you just confirm in the chat that you can hear him?
Cool. Hello, everyone. Oh, let me go back real quick. Thanks for joining me today here at Future Proof. As Shinju just mentioned, I'm Zan. I've been on the Blockstack PBC team for about the past 3 years, originally focused on developing and growing the independent ecosystem of projects on top of the network. You just heard a lot of very technical detail on proof of transfer and stacks mining. We're going to take a quick break from kind of that deep technical run-throughs. And today I'm going to be diving into proof of transfer, stacks mining, and stacking with a specific focus on stacking from the perspective of a stacks token holder. This talk is going to be more conceptual and should be a nice way to take a lot of the technical details that Jude and Aaron went over during the last 3 presentations and kind of wrap your head around the full concept here. This is also a kind of a timely and appropriate talk for me to be doing because some of you may have seen Blockstack PBC, the kind of core team in the US, is in the process of doing a bunch of corporate decentralization. We just created an independent nonprofit Stacks Foundation that's in the States that a large amount of the Stacks token treasury just went to. I actually am creating a company in Hong Kong that's going to be an independent, private, for-profit entity focused, at least initially, on doing a lot of stacks mining and stacking as well. That's about the only teaser I'll give you for that at the moment. We're looking to kind of announce that publicly with everything end of this month. So with that, let's start with some context. Jude and Aaron touched on this a little, but I think it's nice to provide just where we are now and where we've come from. Blockstack has had a network live since 2017, but where are these new concepts like proof of transfer and stacking really coming from? This is all part of the upgrade to launch the Stacks 2.0 network. 2.0 is our full vision for the Blockstack network. It maintains all existing functionality from 1.0, but adds things like Clarity smart contracts, an upgraded stacks chain that extends security from Bitcoin using the proof of transfer consensus. And so let's quickly go into proof of transfer again. Proof of transfer is a novel consensus mechanism we came up with for the stacks chain, which originally, as Aaron mentioned, used proof of burn. I really like Aaron's way of phrasing it that, proof of transfer is really a generalized proof of burn. Proof of burn is when the underlying asset is transferred to an unrecoverable address in terms of proof of burn. So proof of transfer allows a protocol to use a pre-existing underlying asset and network to bootstrap security for a brand new network. And as well to create unique network-wide incentives for folks to kind of follow, which we'll get into in our case is stacking. In the case of Blockstack, the underlying asset that we are anchoring Stacks 2.0 to is Bitcoin, the longest running, most secure chain. Proof of transfer will allow the Stacks chain to extend Bitcoin's security, but also offer things, as I've mentioned, like Clarity smart contract features on the Stacks network, all without modifying Bitcoin's core protocol or code, which is extremely important. To begin to understand how proof of transfer works, there are 2 types of participants: stacks miners and stackers. The simple mental model I use to remember the flow of assets and just keep things straight in my mind is stacks miners spend Bitcoin for the chance to earn stacks tokens. Stackers lock up stacks tokens to earn Bitcoin. You can see the flow here in this diagram below. Let's now kind of take a closer look at how each participates. The concept of stacks mining is really the same as proof of work mining. Miners are spending a valuable resource, a resource of known value, in order to create a new digital asset. For proof of work chains, that scarce resource is electricity. For proof of transfer, the valuable resource that miners are spending is actually Bitcoin itself. This was this kind of aha moment we had where you really only need to go from real world resource like electricity to digital asset or digital value once. Once you've done that, there's no need to do that over and over again. So in order to mine, and Aaron and Jude walked through this a little bit, anyone can kind of mine. Anyone just sends any amount of Bitcoin to the protocol along with their proposed block. The protocol combines this amount of Bitcoin with a verifiable random function to perform the leader election. The more Bitcoin you spend, the higher your chances of winning the leader election. Because stacks mining doesn't or uses Bitcoin directly, it doesn't require any special hardware, which is important. You should be able to do this on kind of an everyday laptop, and Jude just ran through kind of a really nice run through of what kind of setup and technical considerations you're going to want to have if you want to do this full time. Let's now kind of take a look at stacking in more detail. So stacking runs on a 7-day cycle that consists of 2 phases. There's a prepare phase, which is shorter and at the very beginning of the cycle, and then a reward phase. During the prepare phase at the beginning, anyone who wants to be a stacker must complete all the requirements during this period. Everyone who has completed these requirements and is eligible is then paid out in Bitcoin over the next 7 days. In order to be eligible for stacking, during the prepare phase, a Stacks token holder must 1, lock their tokens up, and then 2, broadcast a signed message to the network with both a Bitcoin address that they can receive Bitcoin at, as well as support for a Stacks chain tip. Lastly, in order for a Stacks holder to stack on their own with just their individual holdings, they must hold at least 0.02% of the circulating supply, or roughly, I think it's about 100,000 tokens at the moment. The reason for this is that it limits the maximum possible amount of addresses that need to be paid out per cycle, so that the cycle will never be much longer than 7 days. That being said, it is very important to us that this isn't just a kind of whales only game. And so the protocol actually, similar to what Jude was running through with mining and fair mining pools, the protocol actually supports pooling and delegation of stacks holdings for the purpose of stacking natively. Now we are going to quickly dive into the question I probably get the most when I run through stacking for folks. How much can you earn? So a community member actually used the white paper and GitHub documentation, which does run through kind of the full economic relationships in this system, and used it to create a stacking calculator. Big disclaimer here. You can see third-party app, obviously only estimates. The minimum for stacking is dynamic since it's based on the circulating supply. For me, and as someone that is in the process of spinning up operations to be a big stacks miner and a big stacker with this Hong Kong company that I'm creating, the thing that I think about most and why there's kind of disclaimers around this calculator before Stacks 2.0 mainnet is launched is that the ultimate earnings fundamentally depend on inputs that at this moment are not knowable. For instance, well, we'll go through some of these in a second. But what I would really recommend doing is diving into this calculator, playing around with it a little bit, and especially doing so with the stacking consensus documentation pulled up in another tab. Take a screenshot of that GitHub link if that's the way you want to do it. Another way, if you go to github.com/blockstack, this is just kind of the main README under the Stacks blockchain repo, which is all open source. And if you kind of use both of these, I find the calculator is a really great way to take a kind of conceptual understanding of stacking and actually make it real by seeing how the numbers interact and influence each other. But let's actually, I'm a little nervous to try this on Crowdcast, but hopefully you all can see this. Let's do a little quick demo of the calculator. So when you go in, the calculator kind of gives you a simple and advanced version. I think, in my personal opinion, before the mainnet launch is live, the simple version is not the most useful. It's going to keep everything at most of the inputs at a base level. And until there's any data to appropriately establish a base level, it's somewhat hard to do that. But if we click into the advanced side, this is where things get interesting and where you can actually start to see the mechanics of stacking. So as you can see here, the earnings of stacking are kind of highly dependent on variables, some of which we do know. I can know how many stacks I'm going to have to be able to lock, for instance. We also know things like the current secondary market price for the Stacks token, current secondary market price for Bitcoin. These do pull in, but I don't think they're live. So don't get excited about potential arbitrage or something. I think this is just delayed prices. But it also, so sorry to go back for a second. So obviously, the more stacks I have to lock up, the more earnings I'm going to have, the more reward addresses I have per cycle. That being said, what they're also dependent on that we really don't know right now is, out of the total circulating supply of stacks, how many of those are actually going to be locked up in stacking? If it's less than, I believe, 25%, then anyone who is stacking actually gets extra reward addresses. The full kind of equation for how the protocol calculates that and what the result is in that documentation. And I highly encourage you to take a look at that, as well as to dive in here and play around, especially if you already hold stacks and are interested in stacking, because it's kind of a no-brainer. Cool. Let's see. How do I make this full screen again? There we go. So that's the stacking calculator. And in addition to the actual actions of stacks mining and stacking, I think there are going to be a whole host of opportunities around proof of transfer and with these two actions, especially when it comes to creating tools and services that make them more accessible for folks. As I mentioned, while pooling and delegation for stacking is supported natively, as well as for mining, the services that kind of make that action really convenient and easy for non-technical end users still very much needs to be created. And there's already kind of a base of a market who will need these services from our kind of current token holder population. Now, what I think is interesting here too is these can not only be provided as standalone products or services, but also should be fairly straightforward to integrate into existing apps or platforms, even mobile wallets, anywhere that supports the Stacks token should be able to do this pretty easily. I also think in the long term, most participants will engage in both mining and stacking. and will therefore kind of need services that don't just cater to one or the other, but really cater to the whole economic system in proof of transfer. As an example of this, with the entity in Hong Kong, the one other little preview I'll give you is we're in the process of creating mining bot software that we're down the road a little bit planning to open source as kind of part of the work we're doing. So if you're interested in getting involved with stacks mining and stacking, as has been mentioned, the Stacks 2.0 testnet is very much live. We're about to enter phase 3 when stacking functionality will be added. For now, you can hop on, spin up a stacks node pretty easily and try to mine a stacks block. I am not an engineer by trade. I don't code, and I was able to, pull up the CLI and start mining without too much trouble. So if I can do it, I have a lot of faith in everyone on this call. Lastly, if you're more interested in kind of the creating tools and services for miners and stackers, we're about to launch the Hackstacks Hackathon. It's going to be a hackathon from the 9th to the 25th of September. Some great prizes, 2,000 up to 2,000 in Bitcoin, as well as some non-monetary prizes. This is going to be all around creating those tools and services that make proof of transfer easier to participate in, more accessible, really all of that. And so with that, I want to say thank you all for your time. This was fun. And I'm looking forward to answering your questions. Let me get back into here. Yeah, I can stop sharing. And we got no questions. Anyone have a question? So someone, RV is a good question in here. Yes, RV. So again, that's not a minimum to stack. That's a minimum to stack on your own. So for instance, if I myself, let's take your example that we saw with the stacking calculator, where the minimum to stack is 50,000. Let's say I'm a stacks holder. I have 25,000 stacks. Not a whale, but I think that's pretty good. I don't meet that 50,000 minimum. So what that means is I can't stack just by myself from my wallet. But pooling, again, is supported natively at the protocol level. What this means is, and we could do this in a peer-to-peer way because it is supported natively by the protocol. I could find someone else that also has 25,000 tokens. We could pool our holdings together, and the protocol would allow us to stack as that would make one reward address for the block. So really, there isn't any minimum. I think the thing with pooling that gets interesting is services to really make that easy do still need to be created. I'm speaking to a number of folks who are interested in doing things. This is more specifically out in Asia, but if they support the Stacks token in a wallet, just think a very basic mobile wallet. It really should be super easy for them to allow those holders to stack those holdings right in the wallet with even just the press of a button. And maybe the wallet provides some of that service behind some of the service of completing the requirements behind the scenes and takes kind of a fee for that. But all of a sudden now this mobile wallet kind of has staking-like functionality through this Stacks token. Cool. Looking at a couple other questions. Yep, Pascal, exactly. Which would be the minimum investment to start from scratch a node? Great question, RB, especially because in this space, for folks who may not know, a lot of times setting up node infrastructure and mining infrastructure is a huge upfront capital cost. I think for Filecoin or IPFS, I've heard it can be up to $1 million to kind of get everything you need to really get started. For us, I think it's almost nothing. I mean, this is kind of a good question for Jude or Aaron, if anyone wants to hop in a Discord and ask them more about the details of the answer to this. But basically, you should be able to run a Stacks node on a laptop that you have. If you want one running constantly, which if you're mining, you're going to want to be doing, you're going to want to host that on, something. You're going to want to host that on something like AWS, or maybe have a Raspberry Pi that's kind of running it. But again, these are all minimal costs, certainly much less than $100 US. Danny, is Blockstack building on top of Bitcoin? Yes. Hopefully that became a little more clear throughout some of these presentations. But so Blockstack's always built on top of Bitcoin. We've been anchored to Bitcoin forever. It's proof of transfer. What I would say is actually makes us anchor to Bitcoin in a deeper way, but it also does so in a way where we're anchored to Bitcoin in terms of security. But again, we can offer all of our own feature set, like Clarity smart contracts, light client support, our own asset, all without modifying Bitcoin's core protocol. So that's kind of the aha moment behind proof of transfer, because previously there was this big bootstrapping problem with proof of work. Danny, not being a distributed, Danny's question, does that mean security is as strong as Bitcoin? Not being a distributed systems engineer, let alone a PhD myself, I am not going to say, yes, this means the security of the Stacks chain is exactly as strong as Bitcoin. I think anytime you introduce complexity, you're going to introduce some other attack surfaces. But yes, what this does is it allows a brand new network to bootstrap security and have similar security properties to a pre-existing underlying chain. Whereas before, this was a huge issue, because if you wanted to start any sort of proof of work type chain, one, super expensive upfront to start, and two, super insecure upfront to start. This now solves both of those problems in a pretty powerful way. Is there a kind of limit number of miners in order to be profitable, or at least cover costs? So the nice thing, the answer is yes. As with anything there, you can kind of calculate an economically rational break even for mining. And it's not something that's super difficult to do, because there's no real equipment costs or really upfront costs for mining. The way I think about it is more based on, all the variables at any given time, based on my strategy, and kind of the amount of capital I have to mine, I can kind of figure out what my economically rational break even is per block, as well as, depending on what other miners are doing. And now, of course, this is something that's very much modeled. I would take historical data and kind of simulate this going forward. But in terms of, there being a limit or kind of a minimum, it's not. That's the nice thing. There may be cases where it makes sense for you to commit 50 cents of Bitcoin, plus the transaction fee to try to mine a block. And that's kind of where your economic break even is. There may be times when it's $10 or more. That depends on a whole host of external variables, as well as your specific considerations as a miner. Now, for stackers, no, there really is no minimum. The main reason there is because pooling is supported, you're always going to be getting paid out based on the proportion of your holdings. So as long as you have any Stacks tokens, it makes sense to stack them. There's not really a downside that I can kind of see. Yep, Dan makes a good point. So to add a little bit more color behind, does that mean the security is as strong as Bitcoin? Dan Trevino points out, in order to reorg the Stacks chain, you'd have to reorg Bitcoin. I think that is fairly true. But again, Dan's definitely a little more knowledgeable on the technical details of this than I am. Cool. With that, I think my time is about up. Sorry, Danny, I know I saw your kind of question about transaction speed. We kind of take a different philosophical look on that. I think some of the other presentations will touch on it, but Also happy to, if you all want to message me, I think I'll be in the Discord a bit at different times. And then also on Twitter, I'm just at Zan Ditkoff. I'll just throw it in here. Feel free to shoot me a message with any questions you'll have. And thanks for the time.
Thanks, Zan. This was great. So we're going to transition to our next talk now.